Today? Oh, okay, good. Was I clear? Was I?
Yeah, you were good.
You was about to say something.
I'm just, I knew.
Oh.
And I didn't put two and two together until
Oh.
I saw it today.
And then they didn't find no gun. They didn't find a gun. I'm like, what are we doing? Yeah. All right, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. I appreciate all the fellowship, but it's 6 o'clock. Pastor Krabs, it's 6 o'clock. Pastor Krabs, it's 6 o'clock. It's 6 o'clock. Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
How you doing, sir?
How are you? Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Akron Citizens Police Oversight Board meeting for November the 19th, 2025. I'd like to call our meeting to order and go around with a roll call. Attendance: Anaskevich.
Here.
Castle.
Here.
Costa.
Present.
Krabs. Here. Elton. Hawkins.
Here.
Peoples.
Here.
Weems. Boyd is here. Next, I'd like to make a motion for the approval of last meeting's minutes. Can I get a second?
I second the motion.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes have passed. Now we'll move on to the reading of our values and our purpose. The purpose, the overarching mission of the Akron Citizens Police Oversight Board is to foster conditions and police practices that ensure the safety of all residents of the city of Akron. The CPOB is empowered by a new city charter provision to independently direct police auditor whose office reviews investigation into complaints and misconduct involving officers. The board and auditor also review every standard investigation, whether by the Akron Police Department or outside agencies, into the use of deadly force by an officer. Our values are as follows. Our decisions and actions are motivated by our love for Akron and our desire for all to feel safe in the community. We value unity in voice and action. We respect each other and those we serve. We seek to build relationships of trust, and we seek to always conduct ourselves with integrity. We listen to understand, learn, and lead. We strive to be inclusive of all stakeholders' voices. We value change at a system level. We hold ourselves accountable for our actions and deeds, and we hold our partners and those we serve to be accountable to their actions and deeds as well. This time, I'd like to move to item number 5 on our agenda with Ms. Anaskevich and our public comment.
Is there anyone who haven't signed in for public comment who wish to make one? Okay, I guess
All right.
we have no one.
Thank you so much. Now we'll go to item number 6, which is our committee report outs. We will start first with our auditor's report led by our Deputy Independent Police Auditor, Ms. Keisha Myers.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Good
evening.
I have big shoes to fill with Mr. Fennell, so I will do my best to do him justice. So our first report out involves case number 2025-000-34827. Overview of the incident: officers responded to Bill's Place, located at 517 North Main Street, regarding a suspicious individual accused of attempting to steal and was harassing customers. The subject was identified by the business owner located nearby. Officers officers' body-worn camera showed the subject walking away and initially refused commands. Officers used physical force, including a takedown and multiple closed fist strikes. The subject sustained facial injuries. 2 officers reported minor injuries. Charges included in obstructing official business, resisting arrest, possession of drugs, and drug paraphernalia. And the key findings in this case was that the initial response and investigative gaps, the supervisory review found that officers failed to collect critical information from complainants, violating APD rule. There was also missed mental health information that could have led to a CIT response and reduced escalation. Furthermore, there was use of force assessment. Officers' takedown was within policy. However, one officer, the other officers' strikes were excessive, unnecessary, and delivered while the subject was already grounded and partially restrained. The findings indicate that there were violations to APD policy, use of force policy P-2021-013, and the Graham versus Connor standards. In addition, medical care and documentation, the EMS responded promptly and required reports were completed, so there were no issues found with that. Supervisory review and discipline, there was a sergeant, a captain, and a deputy chief all determined that the strikes violated policy, and the officer received formal discipline, and one officer received a written reprimand and counseling. So the constitutional review in this case is repeated head strikes were inconsistent with Fourth Amendment protections, given the low-level offense, lack of threat, and the subject being on the ground surrounded by officers. And our office finds that all the punches by the officer to be, one of the officers to be not objectively reasonable. And we're recommending that there be a reclassification of all force by that officer as not objectively reasonable and apply appropriate discipline. And then the second recommendation is to revise the policy, which is P-2021-013, to specify that head strikes are allowed only when there is an imminent threat of serious harm, with verbal warnings required when feasible.
Anybody have any questions for Ms. Myers or comments before we move forward with our motion? Okay, can I get a motion to accept the report?
Motion to accept the report.
Can I get a second?
Second the motion.
We'll roll call vote. Anaskevich?
Yes.
Castle?
Yes.
Costa?
Yes.
Krabs? Yes. Elton? Hawkins?
Yes.
Peoples?
Yes.
Weems? Boyd, yes. Motion passes. Ms. Myers?
Okay, our second case involved a case number 2025-00092-383. An overview of an incident is that APD officers responding to a shots fired incident in vehicle pursuit mistakenly detained a suspect or someone they deemed a suspect who matched a limited suspect description and was located near who matched the local description and was located near an ankle monitor ping tied to the actual suspect. The suspect was ordered to the ground at gunpoint, handcuffed, and released once misidentification was realized. He later filed a complaint alleging he was slammed and injured. So this review is of the complaint filed by the suspect or potential suspect. The key findings were that the officer had reasonable suspicion for a brief detention based on a proximity matching descriptors and real-time data. Body cam footage showed that there was no slamming of the suspect, although that's what he alleged happened to him. He appeared to voluntarily go to the ground after review of the footage. Officers used minimal body weight control consistent with policy, stopping him once Once they were identified and identity was confirmed, the suspects reported bruising and pain should have triggered a reportable use of force entry under APD policy P-13-2021, but no report was completed. The involved supervisor handled his own complaint, creating a conflict of interest, and a lack of on-scene explanation violated procedural justice and communication standards. So in conclusion, the force used met constitutional requirements under Graham versus Connor, but the encounter exposed documentation, communication, and supervisory review deficiencies that undermine accountability and community trust. So key recommendations are to clarify the reportable force to include all alleged injuries, require independent supervisory review when supervisors are involved, strengthen procedural justice communication training, improve target verification and de-escalation refreshers, include mistaken identity detentions and quarterly reporting, and implement community aftercare protocols, and lastly, ensure immediate supervisor review and collection of body-worn camera footage.
Are there any questions or comments before we make a motion for Ms. Myers regarding the report?
Yeah, I had a problem with the not reporting the injuries because when they looked at the body camera, they saw that what he had claimed he was slammed to the ground didn't happen. And so I think, again, the injury claim could have happened while they were cuffing him, but they released him. Everything seemed to go well. And then I just have a problem with the fact that Officer Suba, who was the supervisor, went and immediately after the report of injury talked to the guy and made apology. And so I understand the technicality that a supervisor other than Suba should have been the one following up, but sometimes part of being a police officer is you make decisions that in the moment there may be personnel challenges with getting another supervisor there or whatever, or you know you were on the scene and you want to clarify directly, you can answer questions. He went and he made amends, and apparently the individual who made the complaint was satisfied. So I will not be voting yes on this one.
Any other comments, questions?
Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Good evening, Board Chair and other members of the board. Just with respect to that incident, the case, I can't speak to all of the elements there in the auditor's findings, but with respect to the mention that the supervisor investigated his own complaint, if you look further in that documentation that was provided, the lieutenant investigated that complaint, so the supervisor didn't have any direct role in investigating his own complaint. Our policy does reflect that the supervision at the next level do that, and we believe that that is consistent with this case. And as for when he may have, the sergeant, gone to the location, that was simply to extend the apology around the context of the temporary stop and not in furtherance of initial complaint investigation steps. So I just want to share that. We will be responding to that formally and provide some of that context and update to the rest of the components. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? If not, could I get a motion to accept?
Motion to accept the report is written.
Get a second?
I second the motion.
Roll call vote. Anaskevich?
Yes.
Castle?
Yes.
Costa?
Yes.
Krabs? No. Elton?
I just walked in.
Hawkins?
Yes.
Peoples?
Yes.
Weems? Boyd? I'll vote no. Motion passes.
All right.
Ms. Myers?
Moving right along, the next case is 2025-000, 97950. This incident occurred on October 14th, 2025. Officers attempted to stop an individual for a minor bicycle traffic violation. The individual fled, committing additional minor violations. Officers followed with lights, sirens, and commands. One officer intercepted the suspect and pulled him from the bicycle, bringing him to the ground. The suspect resisted by keeping his arms under his torso, but was eventually handcuffed. He sustained minor abrasions and was charged with multiple offenses, including an outstanding warrant. A supervisory use of force review deemed the force objectively reasonable. So the key findings were that the vehicle pursuit policy violation, although the suspect was on a bicycle, APD policy defines a pursuit as any attempt to apprehend a fleeing suspect using an emergency vehicle with lights and sirens, which is APD policy P-17-2024, prohibits pursuits for minor traffic violations. Officers continue to pursue despite the low-level nature of the offense, resulting in a clear policy violation. Also, insufficient risk assessment. The pursuit occurred in a residential neighborhood during evening hours, increasing public risk. APD's balancing test was not met as the need for immediate apprehension did not outweigh the danger. In addition, use of force, a policy complaint, but contextually problematic. The takedown and control techniques were within APD's use of force standards in Graham versus Connor. However, the force became necessarily only because of an avoidable and impermissible pursuit. Supervisory documentation gaps required vehicle pursuit blue team documentation was missing, which is violating APD policy K or statute K-13 and hindering accountability. So in conclusion, the force used was within policy, but the decision to pursue a bicyclist for a minor violation violated APD policy P-17-2024. The incident reflects how low-level enforcement can escalate when pursuit policies are not followed. OIPA agrees with the force finding, but recommends corrective action regarding the pursuit violation. So our recommendation is to initiate an internal investigation into the pursuit violation.
Make a motion to accept the report. Are there any other questions or comments?
Yes. My understanding, and Chief Miller, I'm sure you can clarify this, is that that was put into place so that high-speed chases would not occur when a police vehicle was chasing a vehicle that chose to pull away, and it would protect the citizens from car accidents and being hurt. And even when I talked with Fennell last week about how many police officers do you think understand that vehicle includes non-motorized vehicles like bicycles. And so it's hard for me to understand how a traffic violation and a police attempt to stop a bicycle and then they flee, that creates a certain degree of reason that they may be avoiding the police, and so pursuing them did not put anybody else at harm. And so again, I just am not clear that vehicle includes non-motorized vehicles like bicycles. And so if that is clear, then it is a violation of policy. But I asked Fennell if he thought the police knew that, and he said maybe a handful understand that. So I also will not be accepting this report.
We'll vote on it, Pastor Krabs, so that's when you can not vote for it. Any other questions or comments?
I'm kind of confused on your take, but and I was going to talk about this later, but I'll just bring it up real quick now. You know, human behavior is not an exact science. It's not like math. 2 + 2 = 4, everybody knows that. Human behavior is not an exact science. So there's no way that any police department, not Akron Police or any police department in this country, is going to ever be able to come up with a policy for every single incident that could happen between an officer and community, in the community. It's just an impossibility. So where there may or may not be a policy for something that succinct, chasing a bicycle, whatever, it's up to the officers as professionals who are sworn to protect and serve the community. It's up to them to decide, but was it necessary? Was it necessary? And that's all it comes down to. Was it necessary? Because if there's no policy, then what are you left with? The only thing you're left with is to decide whether or not it was necessary to do that. And if something like that were to turn out to be deadly, then you really got to ask yourself, was it even necessary to pursue someone on a bicycle and it resulted in death of either the person they were pursuing or the officer, for that matter? Was it necessary?
In this case, apparently they thought it was necessary, and Anthony was questioning the legitimacy of that.
Regarding that last matter, in terms of if it was, that incident was a policy violation, I just want to make a quick mention. Again, these are things we're going to respond to formally in writing once we review that in totality. But looking at our chase procedure, in fact, if you recall, there was an amendment a few years ago that prohibited officers from pursuing for equipment violations. The current policy as it stands does not prohibit an officer for chasing or pursuing for minor traffic violations. So as the policy stands now, they're permitted to engage those totality and those considerations, whether speed, the severity of crime, those things are outlined in the policy. But as the policy stands today, they're not prohibited from engaging from a minor traffic offense as outlined. So it would be within policy from that standpoint alone.
Any other comments or questions before we vote? So if I'm hearing this correctly, Deputy Chief Miller, it was not a violation of a pursuit policy.
Not on the merit of the mention outlined in the auditor's report. The other items are up for discussion. And Chief Harding's position is that we are continually looking for ways to enhance, performance and seek best outcomes for situations like these. But in terms of what the policy, the guidance officers have related to that policy, it would not have been prohibited for them to do so.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry, Chief Miller. So they were partially correct in the pursuit as far as the policy is concerned. And then the other half of this is that it may or may not have been correct. Is that what I'm hearing?
So I'm only speaking to, because I would like additional time to review the totality of that, the independent auditor's findings.
Okay.
But with respect to the mention that he indicated that their decision to pursue is a violation of policy, that would be incorrect.
Okay, that was incorrect, but then the other part of it is up for discussion.
We will look at that and evaluate that as a committee. Myself and members of the mayor's administration meet regularly to discuss these types of nuances, and then we'll give a formal response.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, I think it might be helpful to have clarification as to the policy. Deputy Auditor, would it be meaningful to have an opportunity to review the recommendation that is being brought to the board? Because it strikes me that the finding, if there's a conflict between the position that's being taken with what the policy permits and prohibits, then I think that the board should have a bit more of a clear recommendation that takes that into accounting. So that would be my thought, and I would prefer not to vote on this until we've got absolute clarity.
And let me comment on this as well. I think that we have to understand when we're voting whether or not, or to accept a report, we have to understand that Mr. Fennell has multiple things in his report. So when we vote no for a report, we may be voting for or against him complying with the police department. Because we're taken back by one thing. Does that make sense to everybody? If he has 4 different things and we get hung up on one thing, it's like right here he says, the use of force compliance. Like he actually agrees with some of this stuff that was happening. So when we vote no for the report, like we're canceling out everything and we're not taking the things that he's agreed with. So I don't disagree with anybody. I actually kind of lean to Mr. Costa, and maybe we need to get a full understanding of the actual policy, because maybe Mr. Fennell didn't know it, but there's other things in here that actually he is concurring with that we will, actually when we vote no, we vote against the whole report. And I don't know if we are understanding the totality of what we're voting on versus not voting on. Because sometimes we're voting on one single item in his finding or his recommendation, and that captures our attention versus looking at the totality of his whole report. So I'm okay with tabling this report until, he comes back or we find out what's going on as far as the policy, and if we can get a copy of that and what that looks like, I'm okay with that. All right? So
I was just going to say, so basically what you're saying is we can't bifurcate off the totality of what's being said. You can't say, well, I agree with this part, but not this part, because now you're starting to bifurcate the entire report. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. If I knew what that word means, I think I would too.
Separate.
But it sounded like what I was saying.
Google it.
I will. So I'd like to make a motion to table this report until we receive policy on the pursuit. Can I get a second?
Second.
Let's roll call vote. Anaskevich?
Yes.
Castle?
Yes.
Costa?
Yes.
Krabs? Elton?
Yes.
Hawkins?
Yes.
Peoples?
Yes.
Weems? Boyd? Yes. All right. Ms. Myers, I see we got one more.
Yes. I'm just making a note real quick.
Did he call you?
Okay, last report involved case number 2025-001-01709. This incident occurred on August 28th, 2025. Officers stopped a suspect for riding a bicycle at night without a headlight and traveling against traffic. One officer provided the suspect provided a false identity and fled, leading to a foot pursuit. During the chase, one officer deployed his CEW twice. Both attempts failed to make contact. The suspect later crashed, fled on foot, resisted arrest, and assaulted an officer, and was subdued through physical control and 2 drive-stun applications. He was treated at the hospital and transported to jail. Officers failed to seatbelt him during the transport. So the constitutional framework under the Graham versus Connor force must be objectively reasonable based on the severity of the offense, immediate threat posed, and active resistance or flight. APD's use of force and CEW policies incorporate these standards, emphasizing proportionality, risk avoidance, and de-escalation. Supervisory findings, the supervisory review found overall force within policy, but identified 3 issues. The tactical error, they identified improper CEW deployment at a moving bicyclist, procedural violation, failure to seatbelt the suspect during transport, and lastly, professional conduct, use of profanity by one of the officers. And so therefore, there was a coaching and documentation were entered into Blue Team. Our office findings are that the use of force, physical control, and drive stun techniques were reasonable and consistent with Graham and APD policy. The CEW deployment, one of the officers' initial CEW use was out of policy and violated use of force in CEW procedures by creating unreasonable risk of injury to a non-threatening subject fleeing on a bicycle. Professional conduct, one of the officers using profanity violated the APD standards. Counseling was appropriate. In the transport violation, both officers failed to seatbelt the subject, violating transport policy and performance standards. Legal and policy assessment, from a constitutional standpoint, the initial CEW deployment was likely unreasonable due to lack of threat and the elevated risk of serious fall-related injury. All subsequent force applications were within constitutional limits. Each policy deviation, though not resulting in injury, undermines public trust and highlights the need for reinforced training. So in conclusion, APD determined the use of force was objectively reasonable. OIPA concurs in part, finding that the initial CEW deployment not objectively reasonable. Remedial CEW training and formal documentation of the violations are recommended to align with officer conduct with constitutional and departmental expectations. So therefore, our recommendations are to have a disposition change. CPOB requests APD amend one of the officers' force disposition to be deemed not objectively reasonable. And policy compliance, reinforce mandatory seatbelt requirements through scenario-based training and supervisory audits. And then training, provide targeted CEW decision-making and proportional force instruction for the officers involved in this case.
Any questions or comments from Ms. Myers regarding this report? And we're looking for this change, Ms. Myers, from objectively reasonable to not objectively reasonable because of the disciplinary action that was taken by?
So more specifically, because the
Or does this have to do with?
force disposition. I'm sorry, repeat your question again?
Yeah, I'm wondering why we're requesting or recommending the change. Disciplinary action has already been documented in Blue Team system. So was he disciplined because, or was the officer disciplined because of?
The deployment of the CEW was out of policy.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right, we'll roll call vote.
Motion to accept the report.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
Awesome. Anaskevich?
Yes.
Castle?
Yes.
Costa?
Yes.
Krabs?
Yes.
Elton?
Yes.
Hawkins?
Yes.
Peoples?
Yes.
Weems? Boyd, yes. Motion passes. Ms. Myers? Anything?
Oh, okay. Wasn't sure. So there was a memo sent out by the auditor Fennell, and would you like me to just go over the key recommendations of that memorandum, or wasn't sure how in-depth you guys wanted?
I think it might be helpful to provide the scope and the purpose of the memorandum,
Okay.
key findings, and anything else noteworthy.
So the independent police auditor, he's compiled recommendations drawn from recent case reviews, including use of force investigations, citizen complaint reviews, and policy-specific analysis. And the purpose of the memorandum is to organize current recommendations into clear thematic categories for structured discussion moving forward. So there's a series of themes, which I'll indicate what they are. The first one is the use of force standards, tactics, and proportionality. So the theme with this is the head strike restriction, proportional force control techniques, RAP and resistant use standards, tactical alternatives, and CEU/taser limitations. So the key recommendations here are to restrict intentional strikes to the head, face, to situations involving imminent threat or death or serious physical harm, clarify definitions of proportionality, and mandate articulation of alternative tactics attempted, require separate justification for each CEW taser activation, and prohibit CEW use on moving bicycles, vehicles, except in imminent threat to life circumstances. Also revise policy for mount control, prone position, and RAP restraint, including juvenile restrictions, monitoring EMS clearance, reinforce pre-handcuff positioning and safe extraction from confined or dangerous environments, prohibit CEW use in elevated positions, for example, rooftop stairs, moving bicycles, and require immediate seatbelt use and secure transport protocols. And he has cited here several case numbers that pertain to those scenarios. Also, another point here is crisis intervention, mental health response, and community care duties. The theme here is CIT expansion, co-responder integration, medical crisis protocol, and trauma-informed communication. Recommendations are to expand crisis intervention team training and mandate CIT clinician dual response availability, clarify policies for overlapping domestic violence and mental health crises, adopt duty of care and proactive response standards. Officers must exit the cruiser with notified of a possible medical emergency. Add bloodborne exposure reporting requirements in Blue Team. Require dispatch level training to identify crisis indicators. Expand trauma-informed communication with families during medical emergencies.
Excuse me, Ms. Myers, we'll table the rest of the reading of this.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the report out, for the auditor's report, and thank you for stepping in, Ms. Myers. Now we'll move on to Ms. Castle with governance.
So we have two items this evening. The first one is revisiting the request for officer-involved shooting team special services contract. Thank you, Mr. Costa, for reviewing our budget and providing some context as far as that goes. I do believe Mr. Costa is planning on giving a finance report later this evening. But I just want to highlight kind of what we were looking at in regards to this matter. So currently, we do not have it in our budget to move forward with this special project. Looking at our budget, there is a copy in your packet today, but we are looking at it was 80060, other professional services. And we have expenditures that have already been taken from that line item that was reserved for those special service contracts, and we do have an invoice that's pending as well. So at this time, we do not have the budgetary means to move forward with that project, but that is something as we revisit the budget moving forward, something that can be taken into consideration. Item number 2 is the FOP CBA. We have a copy of that. Hopefully, everybody has had time to review that item, the new contract. We've been talking about this as a board. I think back in July 2024 is when we presented our first resolution that was presented as a board and approved with some recommendations that we would have liked to seen go through with the negotiations. At this time, there are several items that were not taken into account with the most recent collective bargaining agreement. If you look at, Auditor Fennell was gracious enough to kind of do a review in regards to that resolution that we approved as a board and adopted in July of 2024 versus the most recent FOP CBA for 2025-2027. And there were some key points just to highlight real quick. One of the requests was an extension of the disciplinary limit from 120 days to 365 days. There was no recognition of CPOB or the Office of the Independent Police Auditor. No changes to arbitration rights for use of force or public complaint cases. Continued allowance for officers to view their body-worn camera footage prior to giving statements. No adoption of the preponderance of the evidence standard for complaints, and no expansion of non-discrimination protections beyond the prior contract. So Mr. Fennell has done some work in addressing these concerns moving forward, but I would like to move that as a board, we adopt these points as well for further consideration.
So can I get a motion to adopt?
Motion to adopt.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Roll call vote. Anaskevich?
Yes.
Castle?
Yes.
Costa?
Yes.
Krabs?
Yes.
Elton?
Yes.
Hawkins?
Yes.
Peebles?
Yes.
Weems? Boyd, yes. Resolution passes.
And that concludes our governance report out for this evening.
Are there any questions or comments from Ms. Castle? If not, we'll move.
I have a question. Is it correct that none of this was brought before the union or as part of negotiations or any of the recommendations that the auditor made? Because that's what I had heard.
That's correct. All these issues would need to be negotiated as far as disciplinary action and what would occur. We can't change the CBA through.
Do you have the mic on?
I have a loud voice, though. So, yeah, no, this has not been presented to the union through negotiations, and we can't unilaterally change a collective bargaining agreement, unilaterally. So the union would have to also agree to these changes.
I'm curious on what point we think, now that negotiations are over and they've gotten the raises, the contract that appears to be a very generous contract, what leverage do we have now that until 2027? And in my experience with negotiations, we had to give up things, wording in the contract and so forth. And I'm just curious why this committee, which is costing the city $1 million a year, a mayor who wrote up much of what the charter amendment, how it's written, how we could bypass an opportunity like that to have some leverage and discuss these things, and why or what strategy was used where we had the most leverage to not approach these matters.
That question I cannot answer because I was not here. I was at Akron Public Schools.
Well, we didn't think you'd be able to answer, but it was still well said. Thank you, Pastor Krabs.
And so, but the moral of the story is no matter what, with discipline and in collective bargaining agreements, it's just cause. So I understand what you're asking, but just cause is the disciplinary function for, disciplining an officer.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, I can't help but echo the sentiment of frustration. I mean, tons of community input went into influencing the recommendations that came forward, and the board asked directly and advocated very heavily to have some type of seat or some type of input in place of the negotiations, and our best opportunity to bring forward the concerns of the community were in those recommendations. And so it feels like there was very little consideration given to the concerns of the community during the CBA negotiations. That's it. It's very frustrating.
Just want to echo the sentiments from Pastor Krabs and also Mr. Costa. We have asked repeatedly to be a part of those discussions, understanding and knowing who we are and understanding and knowing the limited authority that we've had. Our voice being at some of these tables as a board is very, very important, whether it's having a voice at the table for incoming or interviewing new possible board members, which we are currently not allowed to be a part of, at least through those with city council. But graciously, the mayor's has invited us into those, but also not being allowed at the table and even having a voice when it comes to some of the needs that we have as a board is very disappointing, because not only do you take away the voice of the board, but you take away the voice of the citizens who voted to put this board into place. And so I think we have missed an opportunity. And let me say it this way, we've missed a layup, if you will, on behalf of the citizens of this community that did, and on behalf of the Issue 10 committee that worked so hard to put this into place. And so just on the record, I know I speak for all of our board members, that raises our level of disappointment. However, we will continue to fight the good fight as we have been called to do. Any other comments? Yes.
So I'm going to echo Pastor Krabs, Mr. Costa, and Mr. Boyd on, I concur with everything that you all have, said here. And I'm just going to add, for me, in a nutshell, we're being treated as if we're invisible. We're being treated like we're invisible, and not only like we're invisible, but they just basically want us to go away. And they're going to do everything they can to keep us from succeeding as boards like this should succeed. We've had very little, if any, real success since our inception, and we're going into, this is our third year. We're going into our third, we are in our third year, and I just, frankly, as far as the CBA is concerned, I feel like, for lack of a better term that I can come up with right now, they basically gave us the middle finger. They gave us the middle finger, and that, to me, indicates that they just want us to go away. And if we're not going to go away, they'll just treat us like we're invisible. And nothing that we want will ever be considered. Now, who all the powers that be who are involved in this, I hope they hear what we're saying here tonight, because I just came back from a conference, and there are ways to deal with this type of pushback. I'm not going to articulate it here tonight, but they are very significant ways of dealing with this type of pushback, and those efforts have been successful for other boards throughout the country.
Thank you, Ms. Anaskevich. Anyone else? All right. If not, we'll move on to our community engagement and general activities. Ms. Myers?
Yes, so I would like to kind of give an update on the latest happenings as it relates to community engagement. We, as we've reported in previous meetings, we've been doing a series of cohorts that involve community members, stakeholders, and law enforcement. Previously, we've done stakeholder cohorts to discuss the use of force policy what individuals feel as though how they want to be policed. Where do they kind of identify the issues to be as it relates to use of force and the like. So what we held our most recent cohort, which is the second cohort we've done with officers only by themselves, engaging in a deliberative dialogue process. I felt that it was a very robust discussion, a much-needed discussion, thanks to the leadership of Deputy Chief Miller. We had a good, I would say, diverse group of officers across racial lines, also across generations. We had some newer cadets, also some more veteran officers sit in the space, and held a dialogue regarding not just use of force, but kind of where do we go from here as it relates to policing in our community. So, of course, what happens in the circle stays in the circle, but we do have some themes and some notes here that we will share with PERF, who I believe is here. There are some representatives here this evening. But just to share a few notes that came out of that discussion regarding the use of force policy review, what we wanted to know is what do we think, what did the officers, what do they think, what are their hopes and concerns as it relates to this use of force policy. Some of the things that they mentioned were to clarify the roles and expectations and what the community wants from police is something that the police articulated. In addition, they want the review to be based on best practices and balance rights and responsibilities. Also for there to be the policy to allow officers to get home safely every night, because there is a concern that if too much is taken away, officers will begin to hesitate when faced with dire situations. So, but there was also some expression of healing the hurt, because as we know, hurt people, and there needs to be a way for officers to address the past officer-involved shootings and incidents. Also, a lot of officers expressed a desire to educate the public about policing and accountability. So there was a call for individuals to participate in the Citizens Police Academy and do ride-alongs as well with APD, and to educate the public about the grand jury process and how internal investigations work, and to focus on learning, not punishment, to improve performance. There was a suggestion, which we all thought was a brilliant one, for there to be a way for officers to begin to, almost like how when football players in a sport, they review film, they review footage. So begin to review incidents that and study them to determine, like, okay, what went well, what didn't go well, what could we do better, what can we do to improve. So we thought that was a really good suggestion, an idea, a way of just improving and getting better. So there were a couple of CPOB members who attended. I don't know if you all want to just talk about your experience with those officers. And again, we sat in circle. It was probably about maybe 13 or 14 officers. And this took place, the most recent one was October 23rd, was the last dialogue session we had. So I don't know if Mr. Krabs or Mr. Weems, and Mr. Weems, who I thought shared some very impactful stories and words in the circle. I don't know if you guys want to share your experience.
It was a helpful reminder. Everybody that participated in the circle did that voluntarily, but the quality of officers that we have and the people, their desire to be able to serve the community and do it in a way that is not problematic or to bring healing was apparent. It's not one side here. If someone comes to me for counseling for marriage and only one party wants healing, there's not much I can do about that. But whatever our experiences are, and with this committee, we hear about the hardest situations or officers that may be occasionally doing wrong. The majority of the officers, I think, were reflected in that group, and we are grateful that the majority of the people who have become police officers do it with a deep, deep commitment to being professional and to serving their community. And that was just confirmed sitting in that circle. So it was a privilege to just be there to observe.
It was a privilege and an honor to represent our board, but it gave me a different perspective of the Akron Police Department. It shed some light of the things that they go through on a day-to-day basis. I know as a community advocate, I'm emotional, not emotional that it's gonna lead me astray, but emotional on how our community is treated when it comes down to our police department. But at the same time, it gave me some light on some things I just really didn't agree with and carry with for years. But I think that we both sides had a chance to talk and to listen and to appreciate both sides of the spectrum. You know, and I think that brought a lot of healing on both sides. And I do have myself, I don't know about Pastor Krabs if I want to speak for you, but it just gave me a totally different perspective of the Akron Police Department, knowing that we respect what they do, but at the same time, there's just some things that, as a community, we just not gonna tolerate no more. We can't. We have to have a voice. We have to have power in our voice to do things to make a change. We just cannot keep doing the same thing that happened in 2012 and the 1900s. We're still here. We're still here. So, but at the same time, I will say I was honored to be in the room to hear just all different facets of life, female, male, different races that's on our police department. Because I do have family that's on the police department, from here to Atlanta, so I do understand. But at the same time, as a community advocate, it's things that we just cannot tolerate anymore.
And so, to your point, Pastor Krabs, there was, we did talk about, okay, where do we go from here? What do you want the future to look like in terms of policing in our community? And the officers expressed just that. They want to be trusted. They want to also be appreciated for the sacrifices that they make, but also want to be held accountable and want to be better. So those were also sentiments that were expressed. So we plan to continue to have these conversations. At some point, we want to merge both groups, the community and officers. Right now, we're not there yet. We're asking kind of each group very insightful questions to solicit, a more, again, deliberative dialogue so that we can get to a point where, okay, perhaps we are reaching a consensus, because ultimately both sides kind of want the same thing. So we will be having another one, not sure exactly what date yet, but we actually have a meeting tomorrow to kind of deliberate, because due to some scheduling, we haven't been able to really discuss some things. So, but we feel good about where we are, and we feel like we're headed in the right direction. So,
Thank you, Ms. Myers. Anybody have any questions or comments? Ms.
do.
Myers?
I have one question to either Ms. Myers or Chris or Pastor Krabs. Were there any police officers there who were in leadership positions? Like, was the FOP president there?
He came to the first one that we had, but he didn't come to the second one.
Okay. Any sergeants, lieutenants, captains?
I'm not,
Yes.
were?
Sir, you want to answer that?
Yeah, so, great question. There was, to the point of the diversity spectrum, both in the community space and/or the officer-only cohorts, there were people at all ranks. I was at almost all of those, except the last one. But there were lieutenants, there was a captain who oversees the community relations division. He was present. To your point, the FOP president was present. We had some very seasoned, tenured, 30-year officers there with those perspectives, and we had some with 1 or 2 years, and throughout assignments across the agency. So we were very intentional about trying to create invitation that reflected that.
Okay, great. That's good to hear. I'm really happy to hear that, because at the end of the day, especially with new recruits coming on, things like that, you know, there's an old saying that if something stinks, it stinks from the top. So if you don't have people from leadership positions being involved in these things, how do you expect for the line, you know, the line staff personnel? They have to follow their lead. And if they're there and they're getting this type of education from the community and with community engagement events such as this, then you're kind of just spinning your wheels. But if the leadership are there as well, then that's a very valuable thing to have them there.
yes, I concur. And again, I can't sing Mr. Miller, Deputy Chief Miller's praises enough. He was able to extend invitations all across the spectrum. So we've been very pleased with the diversity of the officers. And we want to encourage, you know, officers who haven't participated to participate in the next one that we have. Because again, we're having some very meaningful dialogue and hoping to, again, continue to gain more ground and build better consensus in the community.
Great. Thank you, Deputy Chief.
Mr. Costa.
Quick question, Deputy Chief Miller, is there any effort to almost do like a parallel track of community conversations that expands the discussions that have been having almost like internally? Like, I guess I'm just curious, like, so like discussions happen, they're amazing, you walk away with added perspective, and it then, I mean, it impacts, you know, you and the people as part of it, and perhaps those that you come across on your day-to-day. But oftentimes the discussions are just that. And so, and I think one of the themes, and I've asked you this before, is like what efforts occur internally in order to reflect upon some of the community concerns and traumas like internally, like amongst officers. So I'm just curious, are there efforts to have ongoing conversations, like, or is that being thought about? You know, I'm just curious, like, within the House, what APD is doing to address community concerns from, like, a meaningful dialogue way among officers.
I appreciate the question. I'll try to be as responsive to all of those points that you raised. I think the first step in the right direction with respect to your question is the police chief, Harding, and the city administration, the mayor specifically, their decision to create a subdivision designed to address just that. We had never had a community engagement crime prevention subdivision before their joint decision to create one, and my subsequent promotion was birthed out of that. And so a lot of those efforts are beginning to manifest itself in initiatives that Ms. Myers outlined, not only in after-action reports that they provide, but updates that we then have internally about our experience in that space, and looking for additional opportunities to bring discussion to community or meet community where they're at to enhance some of those discussions. And those are part of our very deliberate next step focuses. We're very committed to deepen that in a more organic way, and we're open to suggestions on what that looks like and means for community from a standpoint of not dictating from an agency standpoint what that looks like, but asking community to partner on what it means to them. And so our ears, my ears personally, overseeing that subdivision are wide open. And I think some of the things that we've outlined here are some of the first steps in that regard.
Thank you.
Hi, I have a question for Stephanie Myers. And my question is, are these just verbal exchanges at the circles, or are there any surveys administered?
Right, so the format of these, I'm not sure if you're familiar with restorative justice peace circles or deliberative dialogue, but so it is verbal. We sit in a circle, we have a prompting question, and we have a centerpiece that outlines our kind of values and guidelines, which is how we agree to really behave in the space and what values, what's important to us, what are we bringing to the space so that we can have a very safe and confidential conversation. So it is really just dialogue. There are no surveys or anything, but we do have Ms. Leah Holden, who's actually here today, her and Ms. Lene Foster, I'm not sure if she's here, but they do take some notes, so that's how we're able to kind of extract some of the data. And it's more of not verbatim what people are saying, but what are the themes, what are the things that are coming up that are kind of thematic and moving in a certain direction so that we can kind of keep track of what the sentiments are in the space, so.
Thank you.
Ms. Myers, do we keep like a roster of everybody that has participated in the circles?
Yes.
Okay, have we, and I don't know, this is just an idea, not trying to add more work to anybody. Maybe that's something that we can do as well as a board, but just any type of thank you card, and just sending a thank you card out to people for participating in the circles. Are we?
A thank you email, maybe?
Okay.
That would be less expensive.
So the thank you card is something maybe we'll work
have
on.
budget crunches and whatnot.
Yeah, understand. Okay, thank you. All right, we're gonna move on to Mr. Costa and Finance.
Okay, that's a good segue, budget crunching. Okay, so you should have, everyone, I believe there was a physical copy of our budget that was shared for all members. I also sent out an updated copy prior to our meeting. Want to do a couple things here. Want to, one, do a review and overview of where we stand at and the status of our current budget, but then have a discussion in terms of what we can expect next for budget planning going into the 2026 fiscal year, and solicit an opportunity for board members for any input in terms of how we could potentially modify that process in order to capture some additional needs. So earlier this year, we were allocated a budget total of $589,352. To date, we currently have a remaining balance of $193,859 for the remainder of this fiscal year. What's key to highlight and to note is of that $193,000 of the Police Oversight Board's budget, $172,063 is specifically allocated for wages associated with labor, our part-time, the cost to pay our employees under the department. In drilling down on that a little bit further, specifically, $66,000 for full-time wages and $78,563 for part-time. Now, that second number, the 78,000, I anticipate that's a little higher than what we would have thought that would have been because of some vacancies within the department. Specifically, it would have been our administrative assistant 2 that we've been without. So that's where I think the largest bulk of the variance in terms of remaining budget that's appearing comes from as a source. And so I think that's just one thing to think about in terms of the ask for the positions that we have within the department next year and what we need from a labor standpoint. A couple of other items just to flag for you very, very quick. There is a deficit that appears within line item 72100, which is travel. That's showing a deficit of $17,000. This is, I believe this is related to the recent travel costs that were incurred by the department for sending board members to the NACOL conference. The travel costs there were charged against that travel line item, but historically, there's a line item 72200, education, that originally was allocated $40,000 that those expenses have been charged against. And so I think we just need to have a bit of a reconciliation and to see if it's possible that those costs can be absorbed via the, or at least the deficit of those costs be absorbed via the education line item. And just as a reminder, the education line item has been used, was allocated historically for opportunities for board members to receive continuing education, but also for opportunities to engage with the community through various education like events or activities. That about does it, I think, in terms of items that I wanted to flag for you. The other item that's worth exploring as well too, and just mentioning, is that we are showing a deficit within our line item that is preserved specifically for contracts. Let me find that line item specifically. That's line item 80060, other professional services. We are showing a deficit of $13,752 under that item. Earlier this fall, we entered into a services agreement specifically for our data analyst contract. And so there was $30,000 allocated for that line item. That contract so far, we've spent down an invoice of $21,500, and we have, I guess, factored in incurring the second half of that cost, which is an additional $21,500 for a total of $43,000. And so just wanted to flag where that deficit is being shown. And then give an opportunity. Any questions?
Go ahead.
So what did we get for that? The other professional services, what came out of that? Who did we pay? Or, I mean, I guess I'm in the dark here.
So the entity specifically, so this was a contract that we hired out for our data analyst. I would defer to Mr. Fennell to give an update in terms of where we're at in terms of the scope of the work delivery under that contract. My understanding is that that contract is phased out with milestones, and so there's some additional analysis that needs to take place specifically across the data before we receive back the reports. But I defer to Deputy Auditor Myers if she has an update. I believe actually Mr. Fennell did include some points on this specifically in his update to the board. But I cannot say specifically what those deliverables have entailed to this point.
Well, what I know is that we have met with our service provider, and we're in the process of giving her what she needs. That's all I can really speak to. I know I've been doing some data entry stuff the past 2 weeks and we'll continue to do that until if I believe it'll be voted on today, the college, and if we get a college intern, then that person will be responsible for that. But I know we're just in the process of doing some data cleanup, so we are working with our contractor provider, but I can't really speak to the the details of it, but I just know that we're doing some data cleanup.
Yeah,
at this
it's
point.
ongoing. It's a ton of data that we have.
Is she working out
ultimately.
of your office, or she working from somewhere else, or?
Yeah, she's out of New York, I believe. So yes, we're using her data analyst system.
Yeah, and that contract was executed at the beginning of October, so it's still fairly early within the like contracting phase.
New.
Yeah.
Mr. Costa, I have a couple of questions. One is the line item 62210, the unemployment compensation seems like at a deficit of $14,135.
Yeah, what is that?
Compensation.
Right.
And maybe it's just incorrect or a typo because I don't see anywhere, like when I look under the journal expenses and then the total expenditures, it's $14,134.97, but it's showing a deficit. And I didn't know if that was just there because if it needs to happen, that would just be a deficit. I'm just asking.
Yeah, I think we want to drill down on this a little bit more.
Okay.
I was gonna ask that next, where unemployment compensation, from who? Because we don't really get paid, so.
And then,
If you want to continue with what your
yeah,
next question is.
then my next question is going to be line item 81110, the property rental. I just see it 10,000. Do we pay rent?
So a portion of the, it's interesting how the city does it because it's city
Okay.
property, but the budget that is allocated to the board or the department, within that, there are rental obligations that
Gotcha.
then are charged against what's budgeted to the board.
Okay. And at the beginning, you said we have 198, I think, thousand left, correct?
194, 102, with
194.
172 of that all being allocated towards labor.
So we have, the quick math, about 20,000, 22,000? Give or take?
Give or take, yeah. If you give me 1 second, I can give you an exact.
So,
$22,041 remaining.
Okay. So we know that all the wages and all that stuff is covered. And, okay, all right. Yes, Ms. Anaskevich?
explain the rental property again, because every time we come and sit in here, we're renting the space, is that it?
No, so that's the office that that the department operates out of.
Okay,
in
the
adjacent
auditor's
building.
office.
So, and it's largely a mechanism for the City of Akron's finance department to allocate the cost of the property rentals. So, I mean, it's just like, it's just appropriating where the various costs for the building,
Like the auditor's office?
where it's coming out of. Yeah,
All right, okay,
where our staff operate out of.
yeah, I got you.
Yeah. Now, there is money allocated in the budget in the event that we wanted to like do an event and we were to like rent a property. You know, there's dollars allocated for that,
Sure.
but that 10,000 draw came specifically for the rental obligations for our space.
Gotcha. Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, two other things real quick. I guess I want to talk about the process. So generally in the past, what we've done is, and I don't believe they've been scheduled yet, the City of Akron has their budget hearings that commence around March or February of every year. Historically, the board has prepared a budget that we have then submitted to City Council and then had the opportunity to come and speak to and give any type of testimony. In the past, the budget process in preparing the budget, we've really looked at what we've done in the past, and then did an analysis of almost what do we think that we're going to need for the next year. And it's been a relatively narrow conversation with myself, Chairman Boyd, Mr. Fennell, and then Steve Fricker, the finance director for the city. You know, my thoughts is that would be the same process going into next year, but I at least wanted to give an opportunity to open the conversation to see, do we need to, you know, is there any additional cost considerations? Is there a process that board members would prefer to have more visibility into? A lot of the times, you know, what we get is what we get. We got very aggressive earlier this year in making some ask towards the city. We were awarded an additional position, and we received some budgetary dollars support through other line items within separate city budgets. But I just wanted to open the dialogue, you know, or at least give board members the opportunity to, you know, say, you know, are there any concerns from a budget standpoint? Is there anything on your radar that you think that we need? Or is there a process that you would prefer that we have moving into this next year, whether that be, you know, a more formal budget committee meeting, or whether that be, you know, something else? But just wanted to give the opportunity to open the floor.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Ms. Cass.
Mr. Casa, just reflecting, I know we're kind of reinvigorating now that we have new board members, kind of our committee structure and what that looks like. I think a great process would be, you know, going back to our strategic plan that we did at the inception of the board, but going back to those goals that we set and going back to that committee structure, maybe the process isn't having a separate budget meeting, but maybe it's budget being invited into those other committee spaces and them kind of realigning the goals, looking at what our ambitions are for the upcoming year, and then maybe each committee would, you know, kind of outline what their budgetary request would be, and then we could come up with a comprehensive plan moving that way. So I think maybe working through in collaboration with those committees might be a good starting point as well. When we're talking about like education piece would go through like community engagement. I know with governance, we're looking at this special service contract, different things like that. So I'm wondering if that might be a good process.
Yeah, I really like that idea. I think we would want to get this done. I think before the end, we want to make the ask probably before the end of the year, and I don't think it's, realistically, the budget considerations aren't going to start until March, and so I don't think it's the end of the world. In past years, we've rushed to kind of, not rush, but we've put a lot of like pace in trying to get it done before the end of the year. And then once we gave it to the city, it just kind of like sat there for a couple of months. So I would say like no later than like January 30, we should probably have a sense of what we'd like to ask. And then probably just work backwards from there. So maybe using the month of very little things happen in December, being honest, and just being real. So maybe targeting the month of between now and the end of January to have a budget discussion portion for each committee meeting. And then if committee chairs then want to like submit an ask from a budget standpoint, I think that would be helpful. And then if we could talk specifically about the training that you had mentioned that governance would like to do, what's the cost associated with that contract?
So that was that special services contract. I believe there were a couple different numbers floating around. So I think we would have to revisit that as a governance committee, because we were trying to work within the framework of what we anticipated the budget had looked like. But now having more, you know, sitting and looking at this, I think our conversation might be a little bit different. And I think the ask could be different moving forward. So I think it's just a good time for us to kind of sit down as a committee, kind of imagine
kind of did a similar exercise around this time of the year.
factors that we need to consider as we're forming our budget for next.
And just would that training piece be like a one-time expense that's incurred?
So it's not a training, it's like bringing contracted services in to collaborate with. Mr. Fennell would still be the lead of that team, but it's bringing in people to assist with the analysis.
Would that be ongoing, like?
So it would be
Funding
kind of
requirements?
as needed. We talked, we have some data now, thankfully, to all the work that, Keisha and Mr. Fennell have been doing. So we have some data points to pull from. Is this, we can for incidents, then that number could or decrease.
Okay.
So we were just kind of looking at what we've already seen. So, but I would love to have a further conversation with Mr. Fennell before I could give you like a definite
Okay.
either way.
So a couple of questions I have. One being, first of all, I want to piggyback on what Mr. Costa is saying. I think it's very important, especially for our new board members, to be a part of the budget-making process. Because correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Costa, based on the charter, the budget can never decrease
So the budget,
based on where we are, based on the charter.
so per the charter, there has to be at least $100,000 that is allocated for the board, and there cannot be a reduction in the board budget unless there's also the overall city budget.
Okay.
But it's a threshold that at least $100,000 needs to be allocated towards the board.
Okay. And so I think that you make, and this is why I would encourage board members of the budget making process, because I think you have to look at this current budget and say, okay, what were our one-time expenses? Like some of these things, budget that we had to spend. They were one-time expenses. So now, to Mr. Costa's point, as a board, we need to think about how do we try to allocate some of these funds going into what we believe we're going to need, not as a board, but the department that we oversee. And so Ms. Anaskevich is going to talk about this later, based on the things that from education conferences, now do we need to be implementing, right, as we continue forward as a board and will. So I would just want to encourage board members, especially to be a part of the budget discussion, so that you think of maybe why the budget was what it was last year, and then between Mr. Costa, myself, and Ms. Fennell, we can kind of break down what were one-time expenses that probably won't follow us this budget cycle. So how do we allocate funding and funds in a different space and in another particular area? But my one question was, and I couldn't remember correctly, starter about our budget from a significant basis, because I know y'all to be quite honest with you. And so, but again, hats off to Mr. Costa, the leadership of our finance. So
I think we were super aggressive with our budget ask last year, and I think the tone and tenor among individuals in city council were, why do you guys need all this money? And with the exception for one position that we haven't been able to fill to the satisfaction of the board, we've really used the budget dollars that have been allocated. So,
and at the end of the day, we don't want to have to give money back. So we're using the money that we've been given. I think we've been good stewards over the budget that we really, to use Mr. Point, aggressively fought for on behalf of the citizens in our community. So hats off to us as a board and Mr. Fennell and Ms. Miles in their office for over the funds that we have and not mishandling them.
So I have a comment. So, in that vein of being good stewards of our budget, I don't know, we're in our third year now, and I don't understand why, when we have a surplus, we don't want to give money back, why can't board members have some kind of increase in the third year, getting the same amount of money that we got on day one? And I think it's prudent and only fair to ask, why can't some of that money be allocated towards an increase for board members?
So I believe actually the budget that was proposed in this past year did have a increased the board member compensation per meeting that was not approved by city council.
Why not?
That's a touchy subject, right?
And you see, I see that as another layer of pushback. Not just with that, but with everything we're trying to do. It's just another layer of pushback.
And Ms. Anaskevich, I agree with you 100% from this perspective. And what I would tell you is to piggyback on Mr. Costa, it goes back to to give to get, right? So in order for us to get some of the things that the auditor's office needed, we had to sacrifice giving up something. Now, not every organization in our city has to do that, but we did for the betterment of, also for the betterment of, I believe, for the citizens that put us in this position. Now, what I would say is I think that as we continue to move on and move forward, in order to get individuals on this board, I think as things goes on, we have to look at the compensation from a real perspective because of the amount of time that it does take from each and every one of us to show up here, to be prepared throughout the week, the different meetings that we have outside of this horseshoe, because all of us are engaging in different meetings around our city and different activities that take up a lot of our time and that take us away from our family. So I'm not pushing back or disagreeing with you. I think that as we meet as a board to talk about finances, we have to be strategic in how we approach that subject. So I'm agreeing with what you're saying.
I think I once said that I would always vote against an increase in board member compensation just because the optics around it, right? There's a perception associated with it. I think that it should be brought up, and if it's something that board members feel that should be revisited, and if board members strongly feel that we should be asking for from a budget standpoint, then it's worth making the ask.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been to 2 NACO conferences, and I've met board members from all over the country. And when I say all over the country, I mean every state that has a board, and they actually get salaries. You know, there are some board members who get $1,000 a month. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, everybody's budget is different, but I'm saying this is not something, board members getting paid is not a foreign issue with respect to CPOB boards across the country. You know, and when I've shared with them that we basically don't really get paid, they're shocked with all the work that has to be done. So that's all I'm saying.
I really appreciate that perspective.
All right, thank you, Mr. Costa. For our HR, I'm going to wait to talk about this until we go into executive session to talk about staff personnel matters.
I have some things to add to that when we go into executive session. Yes.
Awesome, thank you. At this point, we're going to move into agenda item number 7. We want to hear if our city liaison, Mr. Tony Ingram, has anything he'd like to share at this time.
Nothing at this time, Chair.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And then I'm going to skip over because I just saw Deputy Chief had to leave out. Then we're going to go to the next one after that and have our NACO conference comments led by Ms. Anaskevich.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I'm going to try to, go quick, but be precise. So I'm going to talk about these issues, these topics under the prism of policing and policing as it relates to the community. So, I'm not like pointing fingers or anything. I'm just going to tell you what I learned at the conference. So the first one is officer-involved shootings. And they came up they presented an issue which actually is a legal concept. It's a legal concept, and it's called officer-created jeopardy, which I found that to be very interesting, and it is a legal concept. And it's when officers put themselves in situations that result in deadly force, officers put themselves in situations that increases the propensity for deadly force. And they gave an example, which I thought was really interesting. A police officer is following a car. They run the plates. They find out that the car belongs to someone who has maybe a bench warrant on them for traffic violations or something like that. So they stop the car, and they get out. The car does stop. They get out, and they start walking towards the car. And, the driver rolls down the window. They ask, the pertinent questions. But then it appears that the driver is getting ready to pull off. So the officer runs and jumps in front of the car, jumps in front of a moving vehicle over a bench warrant. And it results in deadly force of the driver. The officer eventually pulls out his gun, shoots the driver, kills the driver. So it's something that, the officer created the jeopardy, and the officer could have gone the other way. The officer could have gotten killed. The person could have, pressed on the gas and ran over the officer. So officer created jeopardy is something that's being looked at throughout the country. And what's important about the story is not, the gist of this training is not how the story ends, because the stories always end with someone being killed. But they need police departments with their policies and policy making and policy creation, they need to look at how does this story begin. And if the story began with something, like I had mentioned earlier, was unnecessary, then that's where you take that information and you start making policies from that standpoint. Because was it necessary for the officer to jump in front of the cruiser, and it ended in deadly force, when they already had the plate number? You could have very well just gone back to the police station, ran the plate, see where the car belongs, who it belongs to, go to that address later on. It didn't have to end the way it ended. So that's something that they want police departments across the country to start looking at, officer-created jeopardy. So I thought that was very interesting. The other item number 2 I wanted to talk about was deadly force, and what does it look like for policy change. And one of the things that they talked about was risk management. And this is not to say that Akron Police or any other police department don't already have some of these things in their repertoire, if you will, on what they do for training. But like I had said earlier, there never will be a policy created for every single scenario that can happen between a police officer and a citizen. That's just an impossibility. It's about behavior. It's not about math or science or anything like that. So, and because behavior cannot be predicted, what do you need to start looking at first? As far as risk management is concerned, what do officers need to start looking at first? So one of the issues they talked about was training, that the policy should be used from a tactical decision perspective. And that if there's no policy that exists for certain situations, then going back to the officer jumping in front of the car, there's no policy for that. There's no policy for that. Should an officer jump in front of a car or should he not? There's absolutely no policy for that. So what do? You start looking at different perspectives on whether or not it was necessary, was it not necessary, and you start making your decisions from that standpoint. And there is a skill involved in making these decisions. You have to have skills to do that, and part of creating the skills to do that, you have to look at the culture of the police department, and believe it or not, the shift that the officers work. There are consequences, there are certain shifts that officers work, police officers work, that increase the likelihood of danger both for the police officer and the citizens. Primarily the night shift, between the hours of midnight and, 6 in the morning, that type of thing, and start forming their policies from that standpoint as well. It's just really a matter of looking at some of the smaller things that people tend to overlook. And of course, the culture of the department altogether also plays a part in it, and the culture is all about, leadership. The culture is all about leadership. What's the leadership dictating to their line staff personnel? There are some rogue officers, but the majority of police officers are good officers, and they want to be police officers, and that's why they become police officers, because they want to serve and protect. They truly want to serve and protect. But they also want to be team players, and they also want to abide by what the leadership wants them to do. And if the leadership has a chip on their shoulder against the community and scowls on their face every time they approach someone, that's not a good thing. I was talking earlier about this last incident that happened here in Akron, and I saw the video. It came on television, and it made me think about this. When the officer jumped out of the cruiser dropping F-bombs, that's not necessary. Was that necessary? He didn't know if the person was mentally ill or whatever, and that goes back to the officer-created jeopardy issue. You have to approach people in a way that does not escalate a potentially dangerous situation. So how does this get managed? It's to be managed by the supervisors who are out there with the officers. It's managed by them, the sergeant, lieutenant, captain, whoever's out there on the scene, depending upon the situation that happened. It's up to the supervisor. It's the supervisor's responsibility to manage these volatile and or potentially volatile situations. Why? Because everybody wants to go home safe. The police officers want to go home safe. The citizens want to go home safe. So these are some of the things that were my takeaway, and I thought that a lot of it was very valuable, and I was particularly taken with the officer-created jeopardy piece. I thought that was, I just gave you a brief synopsis of it, but I thought that was extremely valuable information.
Thank you, Ms. Anaskevich. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Ms. Anaskevich? I know Ms. Elton, you went as well, and also Ms. Hawkins. If there's any additional feedback or comments about the NACO conference, please, you can give them at this time. Thank you so much for you guys taking the time out of your busy schedules and going on behalf of the board. We appreciate it. All right. Okay. Thank you again. I'd like to make a motion to move into executive session to discuss staff personnel matters. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, we'll roll call vote. Anaskevich?
Yes.
Castle?
Yes.
Costa?
Yes.
Krabs? Elton?
Yes.
Hawkins?
Yes.
Peoples? Yes. Weems? Boyd, yes. We're moving into executive session.
Did you decide that?
I am tasked
Okay.
just for you though.
Yes. Yes. Oh, my goodness.
Okay.
This was talked about in the classes that we had. Maybe you can tell me if it's possible.
Oh.
Is it possible? I know you want when the citizens come up.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible for us to
I'm
do-
sorry,
Is
Helen?
it possible for us to do like a survey?
For public
We can
comment?
get to- Yes. No, not for public comment, but like, you know how you have QR codes on your phone?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm speaking because I've listened to you over the weeks and the months since I've been here. And you're saying that we are not getting enough public comment. So mine was based on the courses that talked about research and how we bring the research in, but no one ever talked